Picture this. London. Just, everyday London life. And suddenly it's the setting for something straight out of a Cold War spy thriller.
Hmm.
A British citizen, someone with a past tangled up with the KGB, is murdered. Right here, on British soil.
And the weapon.
Mm.
Well, that's where it gets truly extraordinary.
Exactly. Polonium-210, incredibly rare, highly radioactive, virtually undetectable at first. It sounds like fiction, but this is the true story we're exploring today.
Yes, we're doing a deep dive into the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko. He was a former lieutenant colonel, KGB, and then FSB.
And we're basing this on the YouTube documentary, KGB Killing, Who Poisoned Alexander Litvinenko, the real stories one. It's quite a compelling watch, uses a lot of first-hand accounts.
It really does. Gives you a sense of the people involved.
Absolutely. So our aim here isn't just to, list the facts. We want to dig into who Litvinenko really was.
Understand the bizarre and frankly terrifying final weeks of his life.
And the science behind this unique poison, how it was used, how it was found.
And, of course, the key findings from that huge investigation that followed.
Right. This goes way beyond a typical crime story. It's this complex web of international intrigue, espionage.
Yeah, with some pretty profound implications, actually. It's not just about the what, it's the how and the why.
Okay, so let's start with Litvinenko himself. Who was this man?
Well, like you said, not just some minor player. Former KGB, then FSB. He rose pretty high, lieutenant colonel. Deputy head of a top-secret department, apparently?
So serious access, serious knowledge.
Definitely. And what's really striking is how dramatically he turned against the system he served.
That claim he made from his hospital bed, it's stunning.
He said he was poisoned because he knew too much, specifically about corruption deep inside the FSB.
And even more explosive, he claimed it was payback for refusing an order to kill Boris Berezovsky.
Yeah, Berezovsky, the oligarch, very influential under Yeltsin, refusing an order like that.
Oh.
Well, that's huge.
And this wasn't the first time he'd spoken out, was it? He'd already taken a massive risk years earlier.
That's right. Back in 1998, he held this press conference in Moscow, publicly accused the FSB of corruption and even plotting assassinations.
You can imagine how that went down.
Predictably, yeah. He was arrested, imprisoned in Russia.
Which ultimately led to his escape.
Exactly. He fled to the UK in 2000, claimed political asylum. It shows just how much he felt he couldn't trust the Russian authorities anymore.
And once he got to London, he didn't just, lie low.
No, he kept working in that world, didn't he? Advising MI6, apparently, on Russian organized crime. So he remained this figure with potentially very sensitive information.
Okay, so that paints a picture. A former insider, now an outspoken critic, living in exile, working with British intelligence. You can see why he might have been seen as a threat.
Absolutely. A clear target profile, you could say.
So let's move to when things started to go wrong. That mysterious illness, what were the initial signs?
Yeah, well, the documentary describes it as really sudden, really severe symptoms hitting him.
And he himself had an idea pretty quickly, didn't he?
He did. He suspected poisoning right away, specifically with thallium.
Which has a history.
A known KGB poison. Heavy metal. His symptoms, the hair loss, plummeting blood cell counts, they kind of fit that picture initially. His own past probably led him to that thought.
But the doctors, they couldn't confirm it.
No, that was the initial problem. They ran tests, but couldn't pinpoint thallium or any other obvious poison. Must have been incredibly frustrating and terrifying for him.
Yeah, I can only imagine knowing something's deeply wrong, suspecting poison, but no answers.
And his condition just got worse. Severe pain, throat ulcers, couldn't eat or drink. But even then, while he was so ill, he gave this detailed statement to the police.
But he didn't initially say who he really was.
Right. First, he identified himself as Edwin Carter, a British citizen. But then, as things got more serious, he revealed his true identity. Alexander Litvinenko, former KGB FSB.
And made that incredible accusation against Putin directly.
Yeah, accused Putin of ordering the poisoning. A huge statement to make, especially in that condition.
At that point, though, the police had nothing to back that up, right? Just his word. How did they connect Edwin Carter to Litvinenko?
Well, he gave them a lead, a contact number for someone he said he met regularly, somewhere like a London book show.
Okay.
So the police call this number, and they reach a man named Martin. Turns out Martin is an MI6 officer.
Right.
And Martin confirms it. Edwin Carter is Alexander Litvinenko, the former KGB agent who's been advising MI6.
Wow, that must have completely changed the game for the investigation.
Instantly. Suddenly, this isn't just some unexplained illness. It's potentially a huge international incident. espionage, state actors, the whole thing shifts.
From a medical puzzle to a major criminal investigation?
Exactly. As the documentary puts it, it became this kind of living post-mortem. They were racing against time to figure out what was killing him. Was it criminal? What was the weapon?
And this leads us to the most unbelievable part of the story. The discovery of polonium-210. How on earth did they find that?
Well, it almost didn't happen. They sent samples, including urine, to the Atomic Weapons Establishment, AWE, down at Aldermast.
Okay.
And initially, they detected this tiny, tiny spike of alpha radiation. Polonium was mentioned, but it was so small they thought maybe it's just contamination,
Yeah.
from the container or something.
Right, an anomaly. Easily dismissed.
Almost. But thankfully, the investigators, particularly the toxicologists at the hospital, they pushed for more tests. They knew something profound was attacking his body.
And that persistence paid off?
Massively.
Oh.
Further analysis confirmed it wasn't just background noise, it was polonium. Specifically, polonium-210,
Which the documentary calls.
the most toxic substance known to man.
And the levels.
It's
Just astronomical. 1,000,000 times a lethal dose. It's hard to even comprehend that amount.
And the significance of it being polonium-210, that's key, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial. This isn't something you cook up in a garage lab. Polonium-210 comes from nuclear reactors.
State-level access required. Exactly. It immediately points towards state involvement. Making it requires that kind of infrastructure. It's almost like a signature was left.
You have to think about the effect of alpha radiation. It's incredibly damaging inside the body, but doesn't travel far outside.
Precisely. That makes it perfect for assassination, in a grim way. Difficult to detect from the outside, easy to transport small amounts, but utterly lethal once ingested.
So the moment they confirmed polonium-210, everything changed again.
Oh, completely. The hospital's intensive care unit, it instantly became a crime scene, a highly radioactive one. They had to lock it down immediately. Health protection agencies swarmed in.
Okay, so now they have the weapon, an incredibly specific, incredibly dangerous weapon. The next job, trace it. How did he ingest it? Where did it happen?
Right. They had to follow the radioactive trail. Investigators started retracing Litvinenko's steps in the days before he got sick.
Using Geiger counters and specialized gear.
Looking for those tiny traces of polonium he or the perpetrators might have left behind. And key locations started lighting up.
Where did the trail lead?
Well, there was the Itsu restaurant on Piccadilly. He met someone there on November 1st, the day he fell ill.
Okay.
Then, crucially, the Millennium Hotel in Mayfair. Same day, November 1st. He met two men there, Andrei Lugovoy and Dmitry Kovtun.
Both former KGB officers themselves.
Yes, that's obviously significant. And they also found traces linked to an earlier meeting back on October 16th at the Itsu sushi bar near his office.
Suggesting maybe more than one attempt.
That became a strong theory. The polonium traces found at that earlier October 16th meeting seemed like primary contamination, meaning the raw substance was likely handled there, not just transferred from somewhere else.
So possibly a failed attempt first, then the successful one on November 1st. Chilling persistence.
It really is. But the focus sharpened on Lugovoy and Kovtun and that November 1st meeting at the Millennium Hotel.
What did they find tracking Lugovoy and Kovtun?
Well, their movements left a trail too. They stayed at the Best Western Hotel on Shaftesbury Avenue. Investigators found significant polonium contamination in their room, especially the bathroom.
Suggests they handled it there, maybe tried to dispose of some.
Possibly. Traces were also found in a toilet at the Sheraton Park Lane Hotel, another place they visited. It seemed they were shedding radioactive traces as they moved around London.
But the Millennium Hotel meeting, that seems like the key moment. And the famous smoking teapot.
Oh, yes. The teapot. It's almost symbolic, isn't it? Initially, the experts thought washing would remove any polonium traces from cuffs and things.
Makes sense, I suppose.
But the investigators decided to test items from the Pine Bar at the Millennium anyway, and the teapot. Their radiation meter went off the scale. A full-scale deflection, as they described it.
Wow, so incredibly high levels.
Extraordinarily high. It strongly suggested the polonium was put in the tea that Litvinenko drank, directly linking that meeting, and Lugovoy and Kovtun, to the poisoning itself.
Okay, so the evidence trail in London points very strongly at Lugovoy and Kovtun. The next logical step is to talk to them. They went back to Moscow, right?
Yes. Scotland Yard needed to interview them.
And how did that go? Straightforward cooperation from the Russian authorities?
Not exactly. That's putting it mildly. This is where things got really difficult and, frankly, quite suspicious.
Obstruction.
Significant obstruction. Publicly, Russia said they'd cooperate. But on the ground, it was delay after delay, obstacle after obstacle for the Scotland Yard team.
The documentary mentions the interview they did manage to get with Kovtun. That sounded bizarre.
Extremely bizarre. It was held in Nuclear Hospital Number 6, a place designed for radiation victims. Think Chernobyl, which is telling in itself, right?
Definitely suggests they knew what they were dealing with.
Only one British officer was allowed in the room. Kovtun was apparently in bed, barely visible. They couldn't even be 100% sure it was him.
And the interview itself.
Cut short. After just 13 minutes, loads of questions left unanswered.
And the interview planned with Lugovoy?
Canceled. At the very last minute. After all the arrangements, the Russians suddenly said his health had rapidly deteriorated and he couldn't be interviewed.
Highly convenient.
You could say that. And then there was that other deeply concerning incident mentioned.
The Scotland Yard officer potentially being poisoned?
Yeah. One of the detectives experienced severe stomach problems after drinking tea during their time in Moscow. Whether it was deliberate or not, it added to this atmosphere of, well, menace and obstruction.
It really paints a picture of authorities trying to shut down the investigation, doesn't it? Not just being unhelpful, but actively hindering it.
It certainly seems that way. And then the final straw, perhaps, the missing recording.
Ah, yes. There was an earlier interview conducted with Lugovoy by the Russian investigators, with Scotland Yard present.
Correct. A vital piece of evidence. But the audio recording of that interview mysteriously vanished from the evidence package handed over to the British team before they left Moscow.
Unbelievable. So critical evidence just gone.
Gone. It just fueled suspicions even further that there was a concerted effort to hide the truth.
And tragically, while all this was unfolding, Alexander Litvinenko succumbed to the poisoning, November 23rd, 2006.
Yes. And the detail about his body, it really brings home the nature of this poison.
Requiring a lead-lined coffin because it was so intensely radioactive?
It's a stark image, isn't it? Underscores the sheer lethality, the calculated brutality of using polonium-210.
The post-mortem confirmed it beyond doubt.
Absolutely. Found polonium levels hundreds of times higher than a fatal dose in his tissues. Death directly caused by ingesting polonium-210, no question.
Now, after his death, there was pressure for a proper public inquiry in the UK. It didn't happen immediately, though.
No. There was some initial reluctance from the government, perhaps due to the diplomatic sensitivities, but eventually, after sustained campaigning, especially by his widow, Marina Litvinenko, a full public inquiry was ordered.
Led by Sir Robert Owen. And his findings, when they finally came out years later, they were pretty damning.
Extremely damning.
Yeah.
Sir Robert Owen's report, released in 2016, pulled no punches, really.
What were the key conclusions?
He concluded there was a strong probability. That's the careful legal language that Andrei Lugovoy poisoned Litvinenko, likely by putting the polonium in that teapot.
And crucially, under whose direction?
Under the direction of the FSB, the Russian Security Service.
So state-directed.
That was the finding. And it went higher. The report stated the operation was probably approved by Nikolai Patrushev, who was head of the FSB at the time, and by President Vladimir Putin himself.
Wow. Directly implicating the president. Even with the cautious wording, that's huge.
It's an incredibly serious finding from a formal UK public inquiry.
Yet, despite these findings, Lugovoy and Kovtun never faced trial in the UK.
No. Russia refused extradition requests. And Lugovoy, as the documentary points out, later became a member of the Duma, the Russian parliament.
Granting him immunity from prosecution.
Correct. It highlights the limits of legal justice when dealing with international politics and uncooperative states.
Marina Litvinenko, his widow, she felt the inquiry at least brought the truth out.
Yes. She expressed satisfaction that the truth was officially established and documented, even if criminal prosecution hasn't followed. For British police, though, the whole case was just unprecedented. A radioactive murder, state-sponsored, on UK soil.
So let's just sort of pull the threads together here.
Okay.
We have what the inquiry found to be a politically motivated assassination.
On foreign soil in London.
Using this incredibly rare, incredibly deadly radioactive poison, polonium-210.
Which strongly points towards the Russian state being involved, culminating in the inquiry finding it was probably approved at the highest levels.
And that aha moment, the discovery of the polonium itself, that was the absolute key, wasn't it? It changed everything.
Completely. It unlocked the whole mystery and pointed the investigation in a very specific, very chilling direction.
And along the way, these almost surreal details, the smoking teapot, the bizarre hospital interview, the missing tapes, the obstruction in Moscow.
Yeah, elements that make this true story feel almost unbelievable, like something you'd read in a spy novel, but it actually happened.
It really does. Which leaves us, and leaves you listening, with a pretty unsettling thought, I think.
Mm.
In this world where everything's so connected, what does it mean when acts like this, alleged state-sponsored assassinations, can happen across borders?
What are the implications for international relations? For how we understand covert operations?
And, for the pursuit of justice when powerful states are implicated, it makes you think about the vulnerabilities, doesn't it? And the long reach that state power can potentially have, even today.